Hey friends, it's RSKT, and in today's video we'll be taking a look at my first ever sample pack. I put a lot of time and effort into making this, but guess what? It's completely free. So I'll be leaving a link to it down below in the description. Just enter a 0 at checkout if you want it for free, or you can pay whatever you want. This sample pack is quite large, so in it you can expect to find 41 kicks, 41 snares, 41 closed hats, 41 open hats, 41 claps, 41 cymbals, 41 toms, and 41 bells and clangs. Those are just the drum sounds, but you also get 60 percussion fills, 34 bass sounds, 24 synth sounds, 82 effects sounds, and 14 risers. It also includes 3 Ableton Live devices that help you get up and running with the samples really quickly. That includes the drum box, bass box, and synth box, and we'll be taking a look at those later on in this video. So this video is kind of split into 2 parts, depending on like whether you want to use it DAWless with a sampler or whether you want to use it with a DAW like Ableton. We'll be exploring it first on the Synth Deluge here, and of course you could use any sampler you want, like a Digitact or etc. But I'm going to be using a Deluge because it's really the only groove box that I got. I've got a very specific use case for a lot of these samples and how I like to work with them. So I thought it'd be worth doing like a demo and how I go about using them. Of course, you can use them any way that you want, but maybe it'll help to see what I'm doing. In the second part of this video, we'll be taking a look at how to use them in Ableton Live, specifically with the 3 Ableton Live devices that I've included. These devices are so fun. They kind of turn Ableton into a real groovebox style of workflow, and it's just you can get some really cool, crazy, glitchy drum sounds, which I'll be demoing how to set all of that up as well. So yeah, kind of a long video, but I guess stick around now if you want to see how to use it with a groovebox, and head to like this time if you want to see how to use it with a DAW with all the devices and whatnot. I might also mention the Zoya, Empress Effects Zoya is doing a beta firmware at the moment where they're allowing you to use samples on the Zoya finally, which is really cool. But I have seen like a lot of people struggling to get the right sample file type because it's very specific about what it wants. And I tested all of these samples out on the Zoya and they seem to work just fine for me. So yeah, if you want to use them for that, go right ahead. Anyways, let's get stuck into it. Okay, so here we are on the Deluge. Let's start with some drum samples from the sample pack. So I'm going to press Shift Kit to start a new kit. Then we can scroll down. I've just at the moment got it named RSKT Sample Pack. And in here we can see that we got drums, fills, bass, lead, effects, and risers. So we're just going to go into the drum section and let's scroll through some kicks. So there's 41 samples in each of these drum files. So I'm just going to go with a 4th one for here. Let's load in a snare. And let's start putting down a basic beat. Play around with the release time of that kick. Then we can go for a closed hi-hat. Let's add in an open hi-hat. Now, obviously, we want them in choke groups, so we'll just go to polyphony and change these to choke. Now, I might skip over the claps for now. Let's keep this relatively simple. We'll skip over the cymbals and let's have a look at bells and clangs, because there's a lot of like weird little bells and clangs in here that can sort of add a lot to your track. I'm actually going to double the length of this and just remove them at the start. Great. So obviously we could go in and play with the velocity of all of these and add on different reverbs and whatnot, but let's just keep moving forward for now. We're going to have a look at the fills folder next, because there's a lot of really fun stuff that we can do with this. So we'll just scroll down to fills, and there are two groups in here. So group one, they all sound sort of relatively similar, and group two sound similar to what's in group two. So one thing that you can do with these is just bring it into your track, probably whack it on time stretch mode as well, and have it play over the top. Usually I like to add a high pass filter on this and some reverb, but let's have a listen. So without that, we're just left with this. With it. Obviously, you could go in here, you could lengthen this and throw in more if you really wanted to. But what I'm actually going to do is we'll just leave this one off for now. We're going to make a new drum track. And let's go to group one for this next lot. Great. So we can sort of hear that the first half of this, there's one sort of fill, and then there's a tiny little gap before the next half starts. And we can actually use that to our advantage. So let's load in quite a few of these. Maybe something like that. Now we want to time stretch all of these. So I'm going to have like effect entire on. We'll just go down to sample and we'll hold time stretch. Hold effect entire as we click into this. Now they should all be time stretch. Now we don't really want to play these just over the top. So what I'm going to do is have like a 4-bar loop. So we can see that these actually make up a few different variations. So that's really cool and all, but what I actually like to do, especially with the fills in group one, is go into the waveform view. So I kind of like the second half, not so much the first. So I'm just going to put the loop point up the start, and then we'll just plug that back in. So now it's not going to happen over the whole part of our drums. It's just going to happen towards the end. So let's do that for a few of these. Just like the second half of that one. And maybe we'll just use the first half of this one. Great. We could even throw this in the middle if we wanted to. Great, so we've instantly got a new sort of sound on top of our drums that's just throwing in these cool glitchy little fills. Again, with effect entire on, you might want to high pass some of these just so that there's a little bit more separation between your original drum track and these ones. And something else that you might want to try is just panning a few of these in different directions. And that way, whenever they trigger, you're sort of getting like a lot more of a wider sound. I'd probably even go back to the start here and just start panning some of your drum sounds around a little bit more. I kind of like a little bit of reverb on this. Cool. And I mean, you could still keep this original track here as well and have them all play in tandem. So yeah, that's the drum side of things. I might just point out as well in the sample folder, if we go back, there is a effects section. So these are kind of like sounds that didn't necessarily fit into like a melodic category or a percussive category, but they're really fun to experiment with. There's like 41 different effects in group 1 and same with group 2. They're all different. So you can use these in drum tracks or you can use them as the basis of synth sounds as well. Go back to group 2. So yeah, you might want to throw those in with your drums as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and demo some synth sounds. So I've started a new synth. And let's just switch to like Phrygian for this example maybe. So we're going to hit Shift and Browse, bottom to top. We'll scroll down to the sample pack. Maybe something basic like that. Obviously we want this to be monophonic. Add in a little bit of portamento if you want. Great. And then let's drop the filter cutoff. You can have it on a dry filter. Now, obviously, this sample isn't going to loop because it just gets to the end and cuts off. So you're going to want to hold down the start marker and press like anywhere, and then hold down the end one and press somewhere else. And then that way you can find loop points for where the sample is looping. You might want to zoom in a fair bit though, just so that you can find like a good zero crossing where things are going to line up. And it's taking a while for your sample to reach there. Just go up an octave. And keep listening out for that click. I'm just going to speed things up a little bit here because sometimes it can take me a little while to do this. Oh good, I didn't have to. That was relatively painless. Okay, so we'll jump back out of that. Now, some other tricks that you might want to play with here is like increasing the number of voices. So you can get some like really cool distorted bass sounds with this. You might also want to map the frequency cutoff to envelope 2. Or you can put it in the opposite direction. And if you change this to legato mode, that's just going to sort of hold that effect out. That's pretty fun stuff. I'm just going to turn the voices and the mapping for that off right now. Now, if some of these bass sounds aren't doing it for you, just drag in a second oscillator. Turn our sample down if we wanted to. Let's transpose this down an octave. And maybe we want to map the pulse width control to LFO1. We'll just drop the rate of that down. And we'll change the shape to a sine wave. And that's a lot of influence, so let's just drop that down slightly. Cool, and now we can bring our other one back in. Could saturate this more. So yeah, there's just like a lot of fun to be had with the bass patches. I just wanted to sort of showcase a lot of those things because, you know, obviously you're going to get like a ton of bass samples to play with, but what else can you do with them? All of this stuff. And then once you find something that you're really happy with, you can save your own preset and call it up anytime that you want. Now I'm just going to press new synth. And let's browse and have a look at, now this folder at the moment is called lead. I'm probably going to change it to synth because originally I was just going to make leads and then pad samples and whatnot, but I found that these work just as well as pads. So let's go this one for example. Works great as a lead synth, you know. But we want to maybe make some pad-like sounds with this. So we're going to increase the attack and the release. Let's play around with the filter. Now, again, you're going to have to loop these yourself. So we'll just sort of drag this out and find a good loop point. That'll do for now. Cool, let's add on some reverb. Maybe some delay. You know, anytime we can just swap out the sample. But just keep in mind that we'll have to do some loop marker stuff again. But yeah, I think you get the idea by now. So all of these things combined can create some really, really cool and fun sounds that you can save into your own groovebox or use in Ableton or whatever. And speaking of Ableton, let's duck over now and have a look at the Ableton devices. So in the sample pack, there's a folder called Ableton Devices, and we've got the RSKT bass box, drum box, and synth box. So you can get these into Ableton by opening up each one and just dragging them in. Now, obviously, you could just locate this through your browser library over here, but I'm just going to do it this way for now. And we'll just remove all these other tracks. Now, when you get these, you might want to hit the little save icon down here, and it's going to save it to your library, and then you can give it a color and whack it in one of these collections up there just so that you can access them a lot more easily. So let's do a quick rundown on what these devices are, starting with the drum box. Basically, we have this effects section at the beginning, which we're not going to be able to use until we've got a basic beat programmed in. To the right of that, we've got the drum rack with all of the different samples. And some of these are in choke groups. So for example, the hi-hat, the open hi-hat will be cut off by the hi-hat. And if you want to change that, just go into this little icon here. Make sure you got the in and out section open. And yeah, we can see that both hats are on choke group 1. And for some reason, the clang is on choke group 1 as well. Maybe just watch out for that. Also worth noting that underneath here, we have a little send and return section, which you can toggle on and off with this button. So this is basically just here because if you open up a drum rack in session view, you get access to all of these controls up here just so that it's a little bit clearer. So we can do basic panning here as well for each of these tracks. But yeah, we've also got this send effect. So we've got basic reverb and delay. So for example, if we click the clang sound, we can have some independent reverb, but only on that sample. Same as delay. And if you want to edit that, you just click it and then you can change the different sync rates and feedback and everything like that. So yeah, I'm just going to close that for now. Next up, we have probably the most important section of this device. And this basically gives you a lot of control over what sample is being triggered and how it sounds. So for example, we'll select the kick here and we've got this kick select knob. So basically we can rotate this and it's going to scrub through all of the different kick samples in my sample pack. We can transpose it using this knob. You can pan it, got some basic volume control. We've also got attack, decay, sustain, release. So at the moment, the sample is cutting off as soon as I let go, which I'm using a MIDI controller for this. But we can open it right up so the sample plays out fully. Just to give you a little bit more creative control over exactly how you want this stuff to sound. Now, that pretty much goes for all of these. We've got snare select, got hi-hat select and close, everything like that. So they're basically all of the usual suspects. The clang is pretty cool because there's just a lot of cool little percussive elements in there for you to experiment with. And up the top here, we've got cymbal, which already has the release turned all the way up by default. Finally, there's two effects sections. So these actually aren't in the drum folder of the sample pack. They're in their own folder, but I've thrown them in here just because I find myself using them with drums an awful lot. There's just lots of really weird, glitchy sort of sounds in there that you might want to play with. And effects 2 is a completely different set, so it's not duplicate of effects 1. So yeah, pretty fun stuff. Finally, we've got this channel EQ section. This is just so that you can do some like basic mixing on the fly. It's nothing too crazy, but for example, sometimes you might have found a kick that you really like, but it's just not cutting through the mix enough, or it's got too much high end. So no, we can just basically do like a high cut and then just sort of boost up those bass frequencies. And I often find with like a lot of bass sounding stuff, I like to just drop the mids fully, and then you can control where the mids are. So yeah, it's not like the most elaborate EQ, like you could probably swap all of these out for EQ8s if you want, but I just wanted something really quick and simple because 9 times out of 10, I'm using a push 2 to control all of this, and it's just easier. So I'm going to program in a beat, but just before I do, if you just want to experiment with this like really, really quickly, you can just go to like the clips section over here and we can pick like any old beat. You're not going to hear this because of my recording software, so I'll just drag this one in at random. And you'll notice that if we click on it, it's got like a lot more drum sounds than are in my sample pack, and they're placed in different positions as well. So you might just want to hit play and then see where they're triggering on the drum rack here, and then just shift things around a little bit. So we can see that there's a cymbal being triggered up here, a clang over here. We want to swap that out for a clap. So yeah, nothing too crazy. That's just one way that you could get up and running with like throwing in a quick beat and then just going nuts and experimenting with all these different controls to see what you can get. What I am going to do instead is program in a beat myself just so that we can demo some of these effects really quick. Great, so I programmed in a basic drum beat, sounds like this. And now the beauty of all of this is that obviously we can go ahead and play around with like the kick select and select all different sounds and just make them sound like the way that we want without really leaving this device or throwing in tons of different effects on the fly. This is super useful, of course, if you're using a MIDI controller like the Push 2, because it kind of just turns this into like a groove box kind of drum machine sort of thing. So I'm just going to fix up some of these sounds real quick. Okay, so nothing too flashy, but this is what we went up with. So let's have a look at these effects over here. Now, if you want like a deeper dive underneath the hood here, you can double click on this effects rack over here. All of these controls are basically just mapped over this way, and these are all the effects. So for example, the filter, as you drop the filter, the resonance goes up so that you're getting like more of a filter resonant sweep. Same for the high pass filter and whatnot. So yeah, you can dive in there and have a bit more of a look if you want. But yeah, let's have a listen to some of these. Then we've got some basic distortion. Some redux. Got a drum bass just for like a little bit more oomph. And then we got some delay, which kind of like washes it out the higher you turn it. It's really good for just bringing in like a slight fill variation at the end of something. And then we got some reverb. And you know, feel free to like edit this. I'll probably do like another tutorial directly after this one or something where I'm going to show you how to like completely set up a device like this on your own because they're just so useful, especially if you're using like a MIDI controller and you just want some really quick hands-on control over like manipulating your beats and you don't want to spend ages like dragging and dropping in effects and doing all of that stuff. It really sort of turns Ableton into more of like a groove box style workflow. Just before we jump into the bass and synth device, I also want to point out something really cool that you can do with a device like this, because it just makes it so easy to set up for really cool, glitchy sort of beats and fills. So because all of these are mapped to macro knobs, we can pretty much control those with any number of effects. So for example, we could grab the kick here. We can map an LFO to the kick select. Now, obviously we don't want it just scooping up and down. So we're going to change this to a random wave and it's moving pretty slow. So let's up the rate of this. And now it's just bouncing around randomly all over the place. So basically every time we hear this drum beat, the kick is going to change. That's pretty cool and all, but it's like there's just a better way of doing it. Like we're still going to keep this LFO here for something else, but let's just turn it off for now. I find the better way of doing this is to go to the MIDI effects and use the expression control. So don't be put off by this. I know there's a lot of info there, but all we need to do is set all of these drop downs here to random. And basically, this is going to tell our device that every time a new note value is entered, we want a random amount applied. You can change the amount here. Let's just leave it at 50 for now because this video is going to go on for a while. So we'll set it to the kick, to the snare, to the hi-hat, to the open hi-hat, to the clap, and to the clang. Great. And just to save on time, like you could drop in a second one of these, but I might just map this LFO to the tom select. And we'll do the same thing again, but we'll just sort of Oh no, we'll leave it the same because the toms are pretty much identical. They're just tuned down an octave and whatnot. And then we might just map this to the cymbal control as well. So yeah, now that that's set up, every time we hear a new note value, something different is going to happen, and it's really cool and glitchy. We're going to have even more fun with this by dropping on a second LFO. We'll also set this to random. We'll up the rate, but this time let's smooth it out a little bit because that's pretty jarring. So we'll just make it slightly smooth so that we're getting these nice slopes here. And then let's map that to different things like, for example, the reverb. Now, obviously, that's a lot of influence and the reverb's quite heavy. So we're just going to say like, don't go over 30% reverb, for example. We can do the same thing with delay. And we'll probably drop this even further, maybe like don't go over 20. So now they're kind of moving at different rates. We might want to map this to the low pass filter, but this time we'll leave it at 100 and bump this one up. So we're saying don't go under, probably about there. And finally, let's do the same thing to Redux, but we'll only give that a little bit of influence as well. Sweet, so now when we hit play, it's going to be even wilder than before. We can still play around with these controls just to get a bit more control over the sound. Something else I really like to do here is just grab a beat repeat, just to save time. Let's just throw in one of the presets. We've got beat pusher here. And just if you want to hear what this sounds like on its own, we'll just switch this to gate. So it's just adding in these cool little like fills and weird sounds. So let's keep it on insert. Fantastic. Let's throw in an audio track, for example. We'll say we want the audio from that to come in, and let's record out some of this. Great. So now something that we can try is we'll select both of these and let's drag them out into Arranger view. Awesome. So we'll extend our drum bar. And basically like what we can do here is just take out certain parts and bring in some of our cool fill style rhythms that we've got going on here. So now I was going to turn them off, but I might just delete these other effects so that we're sort of back to basics. Let's reset some of this back to where we had it as well. And I'm just going to like make sure all of these are on their default sounds. I know it's not where we started. I probably should have resampled out the original drum beat first, but at least we'll have like more of a consistent beat going. Yeah, that'll do. So now we'll get these crazy drum fills happening in between. Cool. So, it's just like one workflow that you can use to like get some really cool and creative results with all of this sort of stuff. So what I might do next is let's have a look at the bass box. So bass box is pretty similar. We've essentially got like the bass selector control. And over here, we've got these effects, which are pretty much all the same as what you saw before, aside from the drum bus. The drum bus is swapped out for a chorus, which is on 50% by default, but if you turn it off, still sounds good. But if you turn it on, you get this like cool stereo effect. So yeah, lots of fun to be had messing around with that. Now, if you want like a little bit more control over some of these, just go into this little icon here. This will open up Sampler. I always go to say Simpler. This will open up Sampler, and this is where all of those samples live. These are all the bass samples from my sample pack. Now, a lot of these controls are already pre-mapped here for you. This being a bass synth, obviously it's on like having a single voice, but you know, you might want to come into pitch or oscillator. You might want to turn on glide. Now, obviously, these bass samples themselves aren't exactly looping, so you might have to go into the actual sample and like play around with some of the loop points and whatnot. Just find the one you like. I didn't really set up loop points on here because I don't find myself using them that often, especially for bass. Like I get away with what I do. Usually I've got the sustain turned down. I'm just using decay. Yeah. So that's the bass synth. Pretty basic stuff. Now, something I did wind up looping was the synth one. So all of these samples are looped. They've got their own loop markers and whatnot, so that you should be able to hold them out for as long as you want, and they'll always loop perfectly. Main reason I did this is because originally I was going to call this a lead trap because there's like a lot of lead sounding synths in here. But I just found I wanted more polyphony, and I wanted to be able to make chords and stuff with it too, and you really can. So, you know, here's some of the sounds. But, you know, if we play around with a lot of these controls, like especially the release and the attack and the filter, we get some nice pads. Up the reverb and a little bit more delay, bump in some more chorus there. Let's pick a different sample. But, you know, removing all of that stuff, we can get back to like a nice sort of lead sound. And then just bring it back to a pad whenever we want it to. And that's essentially the synth box in a nutshell. Same controls as the others. So yeah, sorry if this part went on for a little while. I'm just finding that I'm really liking using these devices. I find myself reaching for them an awful lot. And especially when you've got something like a push 2 open in front of you, it just turns Ableton into an instant groove box. And you know, you don't have to use my samples for this either. As I said, I'll probably make another video showing you how to set something like this up yourself. And that way you can load in your own samples and your own effects and sort of build it the way that you want. Make a few different boxes, set up a template, and then every time you open up Ableton, you're not really thinking about what sounds you want to use or what samples you want to use. You've already predetermined that. And it sort of more becomes about the composition, like how am I going to flesh out a track really, really quickly in session view, record it over to arrangement view, change the sounds and effects on the fly, do some fun automation stuff. And then you've pretty much got like a really fleshed out skeleton of a track ready to go. And that's when you can start sitting down and really honing your craft and doing all your cool mixing, adding in additional sounds, maybe throwing on some vocals and whatnot. All right, so yeah, that was a really long demo, but I hope that you all got something out of this, and I hope that the samples prove to be of some use to you. Also, as far as the sample artwork goes, I'll probably be whacking up a YouTube video on my art channel if you want to check out how that was made. For now though, hit the like if you like, please subscribe, check me out on Patreon, and thanks. I'll see you in the next one.